Welcome to the cheating infidelity. Did you know over 90% of our viewers don't subscribe? If you enjoy this video, please subscribe and hit that like button. We're targeting 500 likes on this one. Let's dive into today's tale. It wasn't that I had stopped loving Stephen. It was that I had stopped loving myself. And in doing so, I had neglected the very thing that could have brought us back together. Communication, honesty, vulnerability. As time passed, Stephen and I had many more conversations, difficult conversations where we tried to understand where things had gone wrong. I listened to his hurt, his disappointment, and his fear. He told me that he had always thought we were a team, that he had never expected anything like this to happen. I heard his pain, and it was almost too much to bear, but I also knew that I had to face it. I had to hear him, even if it was uncomfortable. Leo, too, was a part of the equation. After that night, when I had confessed everything to Stephen, I hadn't seen or spoken to Leo. I knew that the connection I had with him was fleeting, a temporary escape from the reality I was trying to avoid. But the truth was, I had to let go of that fantasy. I had to stop seeing Leo as a symbol of everything I thought I wanted. He was a part of my life, but not in the way I had allowed myself to believe. I realized that Leo was just a distraction, a mirror of my own insecurities and unfulfilled desires. He wasn't the answer. The answer, I began to understand, lay in rebuilding my own sense of self and finding a way to repair the relationship with Stephen. The hardest part was admitting that I had been so selfish. I had made choices that hurt the people I loved. I had acted out of desperation, trying to fill a void I didn't know how to handle. I'd been so focused on finding something to reignite the spark in my life that I failed to see that the real work lay within myself. If I was ever going to move forward, whether that was with Stephen or on my own, I had to learn to confront my own feelings, to understand why I had let myself fall into this pattern. I had to learn to be honest with myself. One evening, after weeks of trying to navigate the complexity of our relationship, Stephen sat down with me. His face was softer now, the anger that had been present in the early days fading into a sadness I hadn't expected. "Emily," he said quietly, "I don't know what the future holds for us. I don't know if we can get back to what we were, but I want you to know that I'm willing to try, not for the sake of what we had, but for the sake of what we could still have. I want us to work on this together." Tears filled my eyes as I looked at him, at the man who had been so patient, so understanding. In that moment, I realized something important. Love isn't just about the good times. It's about facing the painful times together and choosing to work through them, even when it feels impossible. It's about being vulnerable and honest, no matter how much it hurts. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm so sorry for what I did. I never meant to hurt you. I love you, and I want to make things right. But I need to find myself first. I need to heal from the inside before I can truly give you what you deserve." Stephen nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and hope. "We both need to heal, Emily. We both need to find ourselves again." And so that became my focus. I didn't want to rush into anything. I didn't want to pretend that everything could just go back to the way it was. I needed time to rediscover who I was, to understand what had led me down this path, and to figure out what I truly wanted. It wasn't just about rebuilding my relationship with Stephen. It was about rebuilding my relationship with myself. It took months of therapy, self-reflection, and deep conversations with Stephen. We slowly began to rebuild the trust that had been broken. But it wasn't easy. There were days when I doubted whether we could make it, days when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But I also knew that we were working towards something better, something real. I never saw Leo again. It wasn't that I had any ill feelings toward him. It was just that I had outgrown that chapter of my life. It was time for me to let go of the person I had been, to stop clinging to the past, and to focus on creating a future that was grounded in honesty, vulnerability, and true connection. In the end, I realized that love, true love, isn't about finding someone who makes you feel alive for a moment. It's about building something meaningful, something that lasts, even in the face of challenges. It's about being real with yourself and with the person you love. Stephen and I are still working on our relationship. We don't have all the answers yet, but we're committed to finding them together. And as for me, I've learned that it's okay to not have everything figured out. Life is messy, relationships are complicated, and sometimes you have to lose yourself before you can truly find your way back. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm finding my way back to myself, one step at a time. I found a bench in the park and sat down, staring at the dark sky above. The world felt so big, so overwhelming. I closed my eyes and tried to sort through my feelings. Part of me was angry at myself for letting things get so complicated. Part of me was scared of the consequences if anyone found out. But another part of me, the part one didn't want to admit existed, felt like I was finally waking up after years of being numb. The truth was that I had been unhappy for a long time, long before Leo had come into my life. I had convinced myself that everything was fine, that the quiet comfort of my marriage was enough. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I had neglected my own needs, my own desires, in favor of keeping up appearances. I had buried my unhappiness, told myself it was just a phase, that things would get better if I just waited long enough. But things hadn't gotten better. They had gotten worse. And now I was standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything. As I sat there on the bench, I thought about Stephen. He was a good man. He had always been there for me, always supported me. He deserved so much more than the version of me I had become. He deserved someone who was fully present, who didn't keep secrets, who didn't allow herself to be distracted by a fleeting connection with someone else. I thought about Leo too. He was young, full of potential and full of life. But he was also a reminder of everything I had lost along the way. He made me feel like I could be more than I was, like I could escape the weight of my responsibilities and be someone new. But that wasn't real. That was just an illusion, a fantasy that would eventually crumble if I let it. I knew I had to make a choice, to be honest with myself and those around me. I couldn't keep hiding from myself or from Stephen. I owed him more than this. I owed myself more than this. The next morning, I sat down with Stephen. I had no idea what I was going to say, but I knew I had to be honest with him. He deserved the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I don't know how I got the words out, but I told him everything. I opened up to Stephen about the distance that had grown between us and the emotional struggles I had faced. I saw the hurt in his eyes as I spoke, the confusion and the pain. But the hardest part wasn't telling him. It was seeing how much I had hurt him. I don't expect him to forgive me right away, if ever. I don't know what will happen between us, but I do know that I can't keep lying to him, to myself, or to Leo. It's time for me to face the consequences of my actions and figure out what kind of person I want to be moving forward. The path ahead is uncertain, but I can no longer live in the shadow of the choices I've made. The days following that conversation with Stephen were some of the hardest of my life. The silence between us was deafening. I had watched the love in his eyes flicker and dim, and it broke something inside me. I had never imagined hurting him like this, but in my heart, I knew it was something I had to face, something that had been building up for a long time. I couldn't undo the damage I had caused, but I could choose what I did next. Stephen didn't immediately respond the way I thought he might. He didn't scream. He didn't get angry. Instead, he sat there in silence, his face pale and unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. "I don't know what to say, Emily. I need time to think. I'm not going to pretend that I'm okay with this, but I want to try to understand why." It was a relief to hear that he didn't just shut down completely. I had expected anger, and maybe he felt that too, but his calm response felt like a glimmer of hope. But I also knew that hope wasn't enough to fix the damage. There were no simple answers to what had happened. There was no easy fix. This wasn't something we could just move on from without putting in the hard work. And that work would take time that we didn't have right then. For the next few weeks, things were strained. We continued to live under the same roof, but it felt like we were two strangers coexisting in the same space. We didn't talk much. When we did, it was about the most mundane things. Who was going to take the trash out, what we needed to buy at the store? There was no more laughter, no more warmth. It felt like we were walking through a fog, unsure of where we were going, or even if we wanted to keep walking together. In those quiet moments, when I would sit in my thoughts and reflect on what had happened, I began to understand something painful. I had let my own unhappiness dictate my actions. I had allowed the disconnection I felt in my marriage to lead me into the arms of someone else, seeking validation in the wrong places. But I also knew the consequences of such an action. I knew what it would do to Stephen, to our marriage, to everything we had built together. Yet in that moment I couldn't bring myself to let go of the connection I had with Leo. It was too tempting, too powerful to ignore. I met Leo for dinner, and for a moment I felt the weight of my emotions intensify as we talked. My heart was racing, my mind screaming at me to stop. But for a brief moment I didn't care. We spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and sharing a quiet connection that I had long since forgotten. It felt like I was living in a different world, a world where I wasn't bound by the responsibilities of marriage, of life, of everything that weighed me down. As I walked home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line, that I had allowed myself to fall into something I shouldn't. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward Leo, toward the newness he brought into my life. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel so alone. I don't know how things will unfold from here. I'm still married to Stephen, still living the life we've built together. But a part of me feels like I'm living in two different worlds now, one with my husband and one with Leo. I don't know what to do or how to fix the emptiness inside me. But one thing is certain, my life will never be the same. The days that followed were a blur. I went through the motions of my daily life, pretending that everything was fine, while the weight of what I had done hung over me like a dark cloud. Stephen had no idea, of course. He was as kind and loving as ever, oblivious to the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. He still made me coffee in the morning, still asked how my day was, still kissed me goodbye before work. But every time he did, I felt like a stranger, as if I were living in a life that wasn't really mine anymore. Leo and I continued to meet. Each time we saw each other, I felt more and more conflicted. My conversations with him became deeper, more intimate, and more personal. I found myself drawn to the idea of rediscovering parts of myself I had neglected, but I knew it had to be done the right way. With Stephen, it had always been comfortable, predictable, and safe. But with Leo, it felt like there was a fire. A passion I had forgotten existed in me. It wasn't just the physical attraction, though that was undeniably present. It was more about how he made me feel alive, vibrant, seen. But the guilt was suffocating. I was torn between two worlds, each pulling me in different directions. On one side was Stephen, my husband, the man who had loved me unconditionally and supported me through everything. On the other side was Leo, the young man who made me feel as though I could be more than the woman I had become. I wanted to believe that I could have both, continue my marriage with Stephen while exploring this new connection with Leo, but deep down I knew that wasn't possible. I couldn't deny that my feelings for Leo were real, but I also couldn't ignore the life I had with Stephen, the person I had promised to love and cherish for better or worse. I had made vows, promises that I had never intended to break. Yet here I was on the verge of betraying those vows. And no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't escape the truth. I was facing the reality of the choices I had made and the impact they would have. One evening, Stephen came home early from work. He was holding a small bouquet of flowers in his hand, smiling that gentle smile that always made my heart flutter. "These are for you," he said, his eyes warm with affection. "I just thought you might need a little pick-me-up." I took the flowers from him, forcing a smile, but I could see the concern in his eyes. I could feel his attention on me, like he was waiting for me to say something to open up. But I couldn't, not yet. I wasn't ready to confront the reality of what I was doing. The guilt twisted in my chest, a constant reminder of how far I had drifted from the woman I once was. We sat down to dinner together, and Stephen began talking about his day at work, something mundane, something that should have been comforting. But all I could think about was Leo, about how I felt when I was with him. The contrast between the warmth of my home with Stephen and the electric tension I felt with Leo was overwhelming. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, unable to move in either direction without breaking something. That night after dinner, I went for a walk by myself. It was a quiet, clear evening, the moon casting soft shadows on the pavement as I wandered aimlessly. My mind was racing, filled with so many thoughts I couldn't make sense of. What was I doing? Why was I allowing myself to fall into this trap? How had I become this person? I never imagined that I would find myself in this position. If you had asked me a few years ago, I would have told you that I was a happy woman, married to a wonderful man, and living the life I had always dreamed of. But sometimes life doesn't turn out the way you expect. The quiet moments of contentment can slowly turn into a void, a space that grows wider as you realize you are no longer the person you once were. My name is Emily. I've been married to Stephen for 7 years. We met in college, and I can honestly say that our relationship was filled with love and understanding from the start. He was everything I wanted in a partner, kind, patient, funny. Over time, we built a life together. We got married, moved into a small but cozy home, and even started talking about having children. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, but somewhere along the way I started feeling disconnected. I couldn't pinpoint it at first. Maybe it was the monotony of everyday life, waking up, going to work, coming home, repeating the same cycle. It was as though the spark between Stephen and me had dimmed and I couldn't figure out how to reignite it. I tried to distract myself with work and hobbies, thinking that if I could just keep myself busy, the emptiness I felt would disappear. But it didn't. It just lingered, quietly eating away at me. And then, unexpectedly, I met someone. It was at a local coffee shop where I went to escape the routine of my life. I was sitting at a table near the window, lost in my thoughts, when he walked in. His name was Leo. He was 18, young, fresh-faced, and full of energy. I remember thinking to myself, he looks so different from everyone else here. He had a certain innocence about him, a youthful optimism that seemed so out of place in the world I had grown accustomed to. Leo and I struck up a conversation. It was nothing at first, just small talk. But there was something in his eyes, something that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. He listened attentively as I spoke about my life, my struggles, and my feelings of being lost. I was surprised at how easily I opened up to him. Over the next few weeks, Leo and I began seeing each other regularly at the coffee shop. We talk about everything. His dreams, his hopes for the future, my frustrations, and my fears. It felt so easy to be around him. He made me feel alive again, like I mattered. I knew I shouldn't be spending so much time with him. I was married after all. But I told myself that it was harmless. It was just a friendship, just an escape from my own thoughts. And at first, that was all it was. But as time went on, I began to feel a shift within myself. I started looking forward to our conversations. I found myself laughing more, feeling a sense of joy I hadn't felt in a long time. Leo made me feel seen in a way that Stephen, with all his love, couldn't. One evening, after we'd been talking for hours, Leo looked at me with such intensity that I felt my heart race. He asked me how I felt about my marriage, about Stephen. I didn't know how to answer. I had never really questioned my relationship before. I'd always thought that love would be enough, that if we just tried hard enough, we could make it work. But sitting there with Leo, I realized that maybe that wasn't true. Maybe love wasn't enough if you didn't feel like yourself anymore. I'm not proud of the next part. I never imagined myself in this situation. Never thought I would be the kind of person who would entertain the idea of cheating. But there I was, sitting across from a young man who made me feel more alive than I had in years. He didn't just listen to me. He understood me in a way that felt almost comforting. There was a certain warmth in his attention, a tenderness that made me feel like I was worth something again. As much as I tried to push these feelings away, they only seemed to grow stronger. I found myself thinking about Leo more than I should have, wondering what it would be like to be with him, to feel something new, to escape the life that felt so suffocating.